Welcome to Taking Stock. I'm Amanda Lang. Coming up, a look at the U.S.-Canada relationship ahead of a change in the White House in 2025, including the tone of business between our two countries, the strengths and weaknesses of our friendship, and the opportunity that comes with the change of guard. That's all ahead. First, though, for a look at the state of play between our two nations, it's time for the briefs. The threat of tariffs looms over Canadian business ahead of Donald Trump's January 20th inauguration. While the president's talk of 25% tariffs could be just that, Canadian political and business leaders still have to have a response of some kind in their back pocket. That includes the potential for Canadian retaliation with tariffs of our own. The hope is that it doesn't happen, as the integrated nature of our two economies keeps any real trade war from materializing. Complaints about the northern border are already being addressed in Canada, including beefing up security and promising new technology like drones to help police vulnerable parts of the sometimes porous perimeter. Spending could be in the hundreds of millions. Federal officials in Canada are also planning changes to some immigration and refugee policies to appease the U.S. One bright spot for Canada in 2025 will be the U.S. economy. It's tracking for solid growth of 2.5% or higher. That's good news for Canadian exporters who rely on robust demand south of the border. Source of strength, the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, which is now shipping 590,000 barrels of oil a day to the U.S. and export markets beyond. Meanwhile, U.S. consumer demand is expected to continue to grow but remain muted by high inflation. The Canadian dollar also remains weak, at least in part because the stronger U.S. economy is helping send that currency higher. A weaker currency can be good news for our exporters, but can also spell trouble for consumers, as many goods purchased in the U.S. will be priced higher here. That could have the effect of keeping inflation on things like groceries higher than they might be. And inflation will be one of the biggest issues for Canadians in 2025. But for the 1.2 million mortgage holders up for renewal, higher housing costs will also be an issue. Many of those mortgages were initiated when rates were at or below 1%. Even with recent rate cuts, interest on those mortgages could be up to 3 times higher. And those are your business briefs. The majority of Canadian business leaders are worried about the future of the Canada-U.S. relationship, especially on trade. But given our strong interdependence, will cooler heads prevail? Beth Burke is CEO of the Canadian-American Business Council. Beth, thanks for being with us.
Great to be here, Amanda.
So I'm sure you've heard the same concerns. CEOs are worried about what is going to happen next. Do you think the fears are overblown, or will we actually see a kind of a calmer situation?
Well, look, I think ultimately, we don't support tariffs. We don't think that this is a road that anyone wins. The world and economy has shifted in a way where we are so interconnected that we don't think that this is the best situation for the United States and Canada. Ultimately, though, we've seen this before, right? We lived through a Donald Trump presidency where we had steel and aluminum tariffs. It was rocky, but eventually we got to the place that we needed to be.
And I guess one of the suggestions has been that it's all a negotiation. We do have a pretty big free trade deal negotiation ahead of us in 2026, and businesses will be concerned about that, too. Is there opportunity in that? Are there things that we can iron out and smooth the way for a better trade deal, or is that too Pollyanna-ish of me?
No, I think I'm with you. I think I'm in the Pollyanna camp. You know, this review renegotiation has been on the radar for a while. And, you know, businesses like all of the members of the Canadian-American Business Council have been thinking about it and have been engaging and talking about it already. We look forward to the opportunity to make tweaks to strengthen this agreement because it's so important and pivotal to both of our economies.
We did see a pretty positive market reaction in the immediate aftermath of the election. There's, I guess, a sense that a Trump president is a pro-business president. Is that the impression you get, that businesses will be, other than there's some key issues like trade and tariffs, but generally when we think about corporate taxes and the like, that for the American business community, this is not a terrible thing?
Well, I mean, I think it's, you know, sort of foolish to read in too deeply into the reaction of the stock market after one day on the morning of an election. You know, I think ultimately the business community will be doing the work that we do every day. And so I think we will succeed and we will thrive because that is the nature of this relationship. The businesses that I work with every day talk about how important and interconnected to the U.S. and Canada relationship is. And I think that's where we'll land.
And that's something I think that people are aware, but maybe not the extent to which our interconnectedness happens at the very grassroots level, and sort of at the state. Governors are very important in terms of their relationships. Those all continue to be the same and quite healthy, even though we've seen a bit of a change of a guard there, too, in some cases.
Absolutely. And, you know, ultimately, the relationships have been cultivated for some time. The Canadian Charm Offensive has been going on for a while within the United States, right? It started under the first iteration of USMCA review, negotiation, and it continues. And I think that those relationships, when you look at premier and governor or state level, I think those are really strong fundamental relationships, and they'll continue to grow. And an interesting point, I think there's so much attention that's being paid to the presidential campaign. One thing we know for sure is that there are 50 new members of the House who may or may not have been exposed to this relationship, given that most of them are not near the northern border. So taking the opportunity to seize and inform, educate, cultivate those relationships is going to be really important.
So, in other words, there is a kind of a best case scenario here for businesses to take advantage of.
Always. Yes.
Beth, so good to have you with us. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me. Great to see you again.
Beth Burke is CEO of the Canadian American Business Council. Coming up, the only thing that seems certain about the near-term path for America is that it might be bumpy. So where does Canada fit in? Stay with us.